miss the landing strip. But if he comes down steeply, his plane will gather a dangerous amount of speed. He won't be able to stop before the end of the runway.
The normal approach, we have leading edge and trailing edge flaps, which allow us to slow the airplane down and fly at a slower speed safely. We did not have those flaps as they run off the main hydraulic system.
So what are we going to do? So we discussed, we had two possibilities. One of them was to do a 360-degree turn and lose the excess of altitude. On the other hand, I thought it would take about 3 minutes, and we were already descending at the rate of 2,500 feet a minute.
Only about 3,000 feet above the ground, the plane doesn't have enough altitude to make a full circle. It would hit the ground before making it back to the landing strip. Pearson chooses a second option.
Well, I guess I'll just slip it.
Pearson decides to try a maneuver called a side slip, practically unheard of on commercial airliners, but sometimes used by glider pilots. And Bob Pearson has a lot of experience flying gliders.
I'm just going to slip it down till we're almost down at the runway, and I'll straighten it out. Okay.
Side slipping involves what's known as crossing the controls.
Here we go.
Pearson plans to force the aircraft into a sideways freefall, allowing it to drop quickly without increasing its forward airspeed. Pearson has never actually performed a side slip in a glider, but he's attempting one now in a Boeing 767.
The only way that I could control our speed and our descent profile with the runway was to induce drag in the fuselage by cross-controlling the rudder and the elevators on the tail and the ailerons and the wingtips, and cause the aircraft into a crab configuration. Then I can vary that to increase or decrease our speed or increase or decrease our descent rate.
Pearson controls the plane's descent by using his rudders and ailerons to change the angle of the plane. Crossing the controls involves tipping the wings in one direction, but turning the aircraft in the opposite direction, pushing it sideways into the oncoming air. As Flight 143 begins to drop towards the Earth, Quintel is about to discover something he did not expect. The runway he trained at 15 years ago is no longer a runway. It's out of fuel, out of engines, out of options. If he can't line up with the runway at Gimli, he doesn't get a second chance. Pearson turns the yoke left and pushes the rudders to the right. The plane slips to its left.
We're sitting in the center, which is the heart of the airplane where it starts, so it's pretty solid there. I thought there's a real good chance here that we'll be all right. However, when he put the airplane into a side slip, all that went out the window because I figured, oh, if he hits a wing or something, it starts to catapult and roll. That's not going to work anymore.
The 767 loses altitude quickly, plowing sideways through the air.
When I looked to the left of the aircraft, I was looking directly at the ground because the airplane is angled quite, well, about maybe 60 degrees of banks. The bank angle was quite high, and the nose of the aircraft was quite high. It was an awkward moment, and if it was awkward for me, I can imagine for the passengers, it must really have felt odd.
I saw a sand trap from this golf course, and I thought, we're going to crash.
Pearson must maintain a crucial balance. He's got to slow the plane enough to be able to land safely. But if he slows down too much, the airliner could lose its lift and plummet to the ground.
When a pilot is normally landing an airplane, he's maneuvering the flight controls and operating the thrust levers pretty continuously on most landings. And so I was doing the same thing without the thrust levers.
The is where I thought of my daughter, Victoria, being alone with my husband, and how he was going to cope with our daughter, and how she was going to cope without having a mom.
As they approach, Pearson focuses on his target, the threshold of the runway.
I got tunnel vision like I've never had it before. It was just our speed and our relationship with the threshold of the runway.
But now, only hundreds of feet from the ground, Quintel sees that their troubles are far from over. The Gimli landing strip has been converted into a drag racing strip. Today is Saturday, and it's not just a race day. It's a family day on the Gimli strip. Racing is done for the day, but the airfield is filled with members of the local sports car club, camping out with their families for the weekend. Two children have decided to pedal the length of the runway. They don't hear the plane coming for them. Without engines, it's silent. And one thing the 767 doesn't have is a horn.
Brace! Brace for landing!
The nose hit with quite a bang on the runway. Sounded like a shotgun going off at our feet.
The front landing gear gives out immediately. Pearson brakes hard. Two tires blow out. The bottom of the right engine scrapes the runway.
I was a robot. There was just no emotion at all.
Finally, Pearson sees what's in their path.
And I looked up and I could see two boys on bicycles. They must have been probably about 1,000 feet down the runway from our position when I saw them.
And then at one point, I can see he raised his head, and he's surprised. Here's this big aircraft.
I can still remember the look of terror on their faces. So they were close enough for me to see that.
With no nose gear to steer with, Pearson's only hope of driving the plane left or right is by varying the brake pressure on the two main landing gear.
That's when my heart started to pitter-patter a little bit.
The kids panic and try to outrun a plane that's traveling about 200 miles an hour.
I knew I couldn't take the airplane into these boys, and I was going to take it off into the grass on the right side. There were campers along the west side of the runway that I didn't notice until after we had touched down, and the nose was on the ground, and I can still remember out the left side, people standing by their barbecues.
Dino Calvert is at the track with his friends for a weekend of racing.
One of the gentlemen in the pits suddenly jumped in his car and he took off. And I thought, well, you don't drive like that in the pits usually. And I looked up and all I could see was smoke rising.
Pearson does all he can to stop the plane in time.
Holy crow!
The plane plows into a guardrail installed down the middle of the runway.
Smoke, Bob.
"17 minutes after running out of fuel, Air Canada Flight 143 comes to a final stop on the ground.
Yeah? You okay?
Somebody yelled, "Yahoo!" or something, and then people started applauding. And we were so grateful. We made it. When you believe that you're going to crash, you do believe that the airplane is going to break apart, you're going to have fire.
Evacuate! Evacuate!
Evacuate! All right, let's go. We gotta get up.
Thick smoke is quickly filling the cabin. The crew doesn't take any chances. They want everyone off the plane as quickly as possible.
There was a sense of joy, and then a panic, kind of. It seemed to go in waves, and then a panic saying, we got to get out of here. We got to get out of here.
Less than 2 months earlier, an Air Canada DC-9 made a successful emergency landing in Cincinnati, only to burst into flames on the tarmac before all the passengers could get off.